America, a country where freedom was every man's birthright, where a man answered to his conscience, not a royal oath. But over the years, we've traded away that freedom, one war and one government promise at a time. This is the Destroyercon show. If you felt that loss, if you noticed that the country is changing into something more controlled and bitter, then you already know why we're here. If you like what we say, please subscribe and share the show. Let's return to a nation conceived in liberty. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Destroyercon show. I am your host, Liam Childers, aka the one and only Destroyercon, here with my co-host, the wonderful Keller. Keller, how you doing today?
I am doing great.
Great. I know you had your brother's graduation to get today, so I imagine there's some reasons for celebration.
Well, yesterday.
Oh, was it yesterday?
Saturday.
It's all blends together. It's all one holiday.
Well, exactly.
So, and I'm happy as well. We're in a position in the NFL season where, contrary to every single sign, the Dolphins have outlasted the Kansas City Chiefs in playoff contention. Now, they might lose tomorrow, and that'll end it. But just to think that the Dolphins, who started the season like 1-7, outlasted Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, the corporatocracy, basically. It's probably because Tua said he wants to go to Israel.
Yeah, real, exactly. Very true.
Which, of course, this is a topic that is really in the news right now, as it seems to always be. I feel like there's really nothing we can talk about on the show right now other than the shooting at Brown University and this shooting at Bondi Beach in Australia. Both of them are out of well, they're not really out of nowhere. Especially not the Australian one. So, tell me what you know about this, Keller. I know that obviously the one at the Bondi Beach place in Australia was at some kind of Hanukkah festival. I saw some rumors that there was some connection between like accusations that the Brown shooter had connections to Iran. Saying that maybe this is also linking him to this, like, kind of anti-Jewish thing. Really, I mean, it's become anti-Jewish, but, obviously a large portion of it is because of Israel's actions in Gaza. But, again, I guess my question is what do you know about the Brown shooter? Was this actually connected to that, or is this more of just an accusation?
The Brown shooting is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because the vigil that they had was a Hanukkah vigil.
Yeah.
But neither the shooter or the victims have been identified as like anti-Semitic, Muslim, or the victims being like Jewish in any kind of sense. But the vigil that they had was, they had the rabbi come out, and they had a Hanukkah vigil for these victims, which is weird.
For the victims.
Yeah,
after it already happened.
After it happened, yeah, there was a vigil, but it was a specifically Hanukkah vigil. They had the rabbi come out and they kind of talk and stuff, and there was a moment of silence.
If these people were Jewish or not.
I don't know if the victims were Jewish. We don't know if this was a anti-Semitic attack, and we don't know whether or not the shooter was like,
a Muslim,
anti-Israel Muslim going after students.
Yeah, I haven't been tracking as much with this story. This is one of those ones where really I should be doing more due diligence with it, but I've been hearing similar stuff like that. I saw something from the police chief. I know one of the things that you sent to me, and I saw this as well, is that Tommy Tuberville seems to be openly linking it to some kind of Middle Eastern
Islamic
terrorists.
terror.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Really, I think on almost to a real exaggerated point. I mean, he's saying that like the Islamic death cult is incompatible with America, and we all know what he said when the police chief literally says he yelled something before firing in a classroom. So we
Mhm.
literally don't know what he said, but we're saying that we know that he said something relating to Islam. That seems like a baseless accusation. Um, a lot
I'm
of
thinking
this,
so too.
a lot of this seems kind of like what they do with um gun control in general, where like they use a crisis as a way to justify basically tighter restrictions. I think
Hmm.
that we talked about this last week, and I think you had a really good take on it, and I wanted to bring it up was the fact that Mr. Nostradamus Keller over here was talking about how it seems like there's been rumors going around. I mean, there's already the thing going on with the Afghan shooter that there would probably be more attacks kind of like this. But really, what you said was that the attacks like this are likely going to be used as a justification for tightening down on Middle East situation affairs, and I mean most likely as a way to try to justify ending the ceasefire in Gaza, which is already hanging on by a thread. So I
Yeah.
wanted to know if you wanted to give any comments on that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I'm a Nostradamus in this sense. I'm just really good at recognizing patterns.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'm not fully surprised. In regards to the Bondi Beach, the minute this started coming out, there was some. I don't even know if they were right. I just saw it on my timeline. There was immediately something about the Israeli security calling
yeah.
this, an Iran backing
Yeah,
attack.
I've seen this. I've seen that they're claiming that
Which,
Iran is back to the Bondi Beach
yeah,
situation.
there's been multiple tweets about that, but I have
Well,
not yet found like a legacy
and
media
and I saw
saying that
something.
Israel securities, has been
Well, I saw
has
Netanyahu
released this
addressed it
info.
too. I saw
He
something.
did.
I saw something where Netanyahu was talking about like you know how this is the natural result of people asking for a Palestinian state.
Oh,
So
okay. So he was alluding to it. Okay.
yeah, yeah, he said that these terrible attacks are the natural consequence of people asking for a Palestinian state. And
Yeah.
it is all just kind of laughable because the way they're framing it really again as they have been framing every single similar situation as almost just an event out of nowhere where they're defending themselves bravely from the Palestinians and have never ever 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 done anything wrong, and these attacks are just the works of these people who are just they're just hate people from Israel because of their Twitter or whatever, and it just completely overrules the fact that they are causing real violence, and I think there's probably a level where the Israelis want to provoke anti-Semitism and externally. There's been rumors about this in the past where the Israeli government attempts to promote movement to Israel via anti Semitic actions in Western countries, so that becoming Israel has a declining population like most Western countries. If they can get the Jews out of Europe and come to Israel, they can help them to overcrowd the Palestinians further. So I've heard rumors about that, and it does seem like the Israeli government's using that to their advantage. The fact that these both happen and they're both being used in the same way, so close to each other as well, is very, very striking. And
Yeah.
you know what's really weird is this. I feel like, and maybe this is just because of like me being more libertarian. I feel like there's almost no conversation on the gun restrictions. Like
No,
Typically after an attack like this, that's the only
it's here.
conversation we have, and it's really weird that we're not having any of that, and it's all about how terrible the Arabs are, and how Israel. There's so much hatred towards the Jews in this country. It's just gonna be really hard to say that this is not gonna get exposed as some kind of. I mean, it just seems like, and I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist, and I mean, like, it's way too early to tell, but this really does have all the hallmarks of like a false flag kind of situation
Yeah,
where like the Israelis most likely, probably with help from like the CIA, and we know that this has been done in the past, uh, orchestrated this kind of attack, used this guy kind of as a patsy and a fall guy, and then utilized the crisis and the tragedy towards their external benefit. Um,
exactly.
but this is just really quite a crazy situation. I mean, like,
Well, one of the guys also, one of the gunmen, I think it was the son. It was two people, a father and a son.
yeah,
I saw the video of one dude able to get on the guy, grab the gun from him. I read that he shot him twice with it. The shooter, that he was shot twice by the dude that grabbed the gun from him. It turned out that that dude that wrestled the gun out of his hands was I think, from what I understand, he was a Lebanese national, but he was a Syrian Muslim, which is weird to find him there at that same time. But then again, it's also Australia, so uh,
yeah,
but he wrestled the guy, and there's not a lot of talking about that. What you're seeing actually, the only people who are really talking about it are all these Muslims in the comment section.
yeah.
I think it was also released on whatever Legacy News article that I was reading it on. Um, but no one's talking about that. So you would think there is definitely something there. More to it than just what it is, especially with the comparing it to the with the Brown shooting.
Yeah,
I was
and we
in
don't know
Providence a
anything
month
about.
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't really know much about the Brown shooter. It seems like, and again, the fact that it is just so blatantly like this is something that is going to get used to basically continue to exercise these draconian anti-Semitism policies, which I think is just going to make people more anti-Semitic. I mean, it seems like the government, like, they basically managed to ruin everything that they hope to stop, and it's like there's just these short-term victories that seem to be long-term having negative effects for the Jewish community, and I think also um, there's a lot of folly in the Israeli idea that Netanyahu has of wanting to centralize the Jews in one location, especially if you make all of your neighbors hate you. Because if you're all centralized in one location, it's easier for them to get rid of you. I mean, you're already all packed together, so there's just so much wrong with it. Um,
I think there's a lot of parallel with the October 7th shooting because
yeah,
again, you're at a festival, Jewish people are celebrating. This time was a
probably. I
music
mean, it does
festival,
seem
but
like there's some level of that. I don't think that. I mean, like, I guess there's probably some level where they're trying to allude to that, but I just it's just such a weird situation, and
it's a callback. You
but
know, they're trying to
it's also just the fact.
reinforce it.
What's also interesting, and just to kind of take a more meta analysis of it, is the conversation around the whole situation,
Mhm.
where the conversation around a situation like this is not just accepted on face value anymore. If anything, like, it's kind of funny that the immediate assumption seems to be that there's some kind of conspiracy. And that's not like just kind of us saying that. It does seem like that is what people are thinking when anything like this happened. It's like Charlie Kirk and all this kind of stuff. Everything is a conspiracy now, and it's like, well, yeah, because like 7 out of 10 of them end up being right. So this is it's pretty rough right now, though. Pretty interesting to watch. I think it's interesting too because this story with the university shootings is paralleling, and we kind of alluded this before, but it's paralleling what's going on in Syria, where there was 3 Americans killed by ISIS in Syria. Um, what I found really interesting about this, um, that essentially there hadn't been any casualties since Assad fell, but we had known that there was a lot of tensions here on the ground to begin with, and it, we also know that the Syrian position is very, very unstable. A lot of the regional powers in that area seem to be talking about kind of splitting it apart. And I think today is the anniversary of Bashar's collapse. So, or at least it's right around
Oh,
now. So,
yeah, ISIS gunmen. All of a sudden, ISIS is popping back up now, making a reappearance.
but like, is this really surprising when the head of the Syrian government is a former member of Al Qaeda who helped to run the Syrian branch of ISIS? Like, I mean, it's not really that
Huh?
surprising. No, not Bashar. This Jelani guy.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So what is also shocking is just this is all happening at the same time as what's going like the bombings in Lebanon are continuing, the bombings in Gaza are continuing. It seems like Israel is preparing to make Syria a third stage of this conflict, and it's kind of like, why are we really doing this? It the Israelis, I think, are getting themselves far too overextended, and it's just I don't really understand the political sense to it. It almost seems like they're in the same kind of. It's almost like the debt spiral, right? Where it's just band aid after band aid after band aid. The Israelis seem to be like they're hatching holes in a sinking ship, really. Where the Arab states are getting wealthier and more powerful, and the position they used to occupy as the only U.S. ally in the Middle East that actually matters is like vanishing rapidly. So it's the same thing, like why their position's kind of fading in U.S. affairs. I just think that like obviously part of it's that like people just aren't as religious as they used to be, but like also like even if they are, they're not nearly as dispensationalist as they used to be. And it just seems like so much of the machine that they have built up over the years is really falling apart. And a lot of people are like saying that they exercise so much control over the government, but the actions they seem to be taking, in my opinion, are the actions of people that are panicking. And and I think that their actions in the Middle East kind of correlate with that. And I think that they can kind of see the forest for the trees, which is that. And I think this is really the Likud. It might not be the nation of Israel as a whole, but I think the Likud knows that they're on the way out, and unless they get some kind of really quick fix of this situation, it's going to be the end for them. So,
Yeah,
so either way,
this is interesting. This is interesting though, because when Al-Shara
yeah,
uh overthrew Assad, I got his names. I pushed his names together. When Assad fled and he took over, Israel was happy and
yeah.
congratulated. And now we're seeing again another attack.
Well, I don't think
So
that's that surprising, though. I think that if you knew what the Israelis were doing, And what the Israeli intention has always been from the beginning is to keep Syria destabilized so that they don't have to worry about Syria. Because Syria, before under Hafez and in the early stages of Bashar, was a pretty powerful opposition power to the current government in Israel. Now, when they got destabilized, they weren't able to provide that sort of opposition anymore, mostly because of Israeli occupation of the Golan Heights. And so the Golan Heights has been expanded ever since. And this is like, have you heard the stories about how like Israel is helping, quote unquote, the Druze minority in southern Syria by basically occupying all this additional territory? That is them expanding the Golan Heights. So it just does seem like though they really don't have another way out besides their military affairs, and they've invested in trying to get this done one way. And October 7th really messed that up, which I think was the intent of Hamas. Like, Israel almost had a position where they had good enough relations with the Arabs that they really almost could treat Palestine however they wanted to. But just before they were finally able to get everything worked out, this completely ruined everything. So, I mean, like, I think that Hamas really got their win there, and that's something that the Israelis are never going to get back to.
Yeah.
It's quite bizarre. I mean, I don't know what their intention is. I mean, it seems like the entire world is just continuing to hate them more. And their government seems happy to continue that trend. And it's hard. I mean, like, even people that like you would never have like previously imagined to be having this conversation are like talking, like dispensationalists are questioning what's going on with the US and Israel. Like, it's so crazy. It really is so crazy. Oh, speaking of, have you seen this story? And this is a little bit, I didn't give you a news story for this, but I saw it on Scott Horton and a few others. Um where they've been going around and like paying the pastors to like basically put out pro-Israeli propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where,
I saw that there's a whole list.
yeah,
All of them like mostly non-denominational churches.
yeah, like mega churches and stuff like that. I know that they were saying that one
Evangelical.
of them was Kenneth Copeland. I mean, of course, Kenneth Copeland. Ugh. But but one of the things I thought was so fascinating, and there must have been some kind of order where they misspelled the names, where the pastors, and they had the videos where um all these pastors are making the same mistake, where they were telling their congregations, you got to stop listening to Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen, and not Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. They like, it was like six of them, and they had like a compilation, and they were all saying Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen.
So they gave him a script. They gave him a
Yeah, they
sermon
gave him
to
a
do on.
script. They gave him a script, exactly. Can you believe that? And
I haven't seen that, but I believe it.
Scott Horton had a great episode with this guy who had worked for the Israeli like, I guess it's their consulate, so like, like almost like the embassy in
Mhm.
Texas. And he was their representative to the faith ministers, and he was basically a whistleblower talking about how they did this. So if you haven't seen that, that's actually really an interesting story. I thought that was just something quite fascinating to see, um, how they essentially repeal, or how he went through and talked about how they hired him kind of under the guise of being like, oh yeah, we need you to like be a bridge to the Christian communities or whatever. And basically it was like, we need you to spread propaganda about Israel to suit our political means, and like rile fear up amongst dispensationalists and stuff like that. Really fascinating. Really fascinating.
Yeah. I did just get an update to briefly go back to the Brown stuff. It looks like I might need to make a small correction.
Yeah.
The event, there was already an event in place, which was originally scheduled as a tree lighting and menorah lighting.
Yeah.
Of course, it's still on the first day of Hanukkah.
Yeah, and that's
It
what
was
I
open. It
thought.
was open all, and yeah,
And
it turned
they
into
held
a
they held it
vigil.
at a
But
vigil. Okay, that's fair. That makes sense.
yeah,
Well, in that case, I mean, but that doesn't change the fact that the U.S. senator and all these other people are still making the insinuation, and it doesn't seem like we have evidence that it was related to it.
absolutely.
So I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that they start it where it's like, oh, we have to, they're it's those dang Muslims, and then everyone's like, oh wow, look, they're hosting a Jewish vigil. They don't even know the people are Jewish, and then it just becomes this cycle where basically both sides are accusing each other of things that aren't even real. So that's pretty crazy. This it's just so terrible. And it's amazing how like the PR for the Israelis is doing so terribly. I mean, like the fact that at the beginning of this war, it was in like 49% Americans or something ridiculous like that. Um, like or like a plus 49% in favor of Israel, so like 49 points above the baseline, and now it's like -1. They just they are just so out of the league, and I think that making them the issue that will be like one of the primary issues next election, it's gonna be such a disaster for them. They thought that Zoran was bad. It's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna be such a disaster. I really do think that's gonna be the case for them. All right, everybody. This is Liam and Keller making a little edit later. One of the things that we found, Keller, would you like to explain? You have it pulled up in front of you, I think, right?
I do. So I just found this on Twitter. Apparently, the Brown University shooter stormed a classroom. This is what Visegrad is using here. The verbiage. Storm a classroom of Professor Rachel Friedberg, who, as you can tell, is Jewish and is also part of a program in Judaic studies.
Mm.
Uh, she was a teaching professor of economics at in Judaic studies. She's done deliberations and testified before Congress and done in Congress and in the Knesset, which is interesting. She's like trying to combine her research is trying to combine like economics and Jewish studies. And apparently, I guess she was like teaching a class regarding this. Because I mean that's her specialty, so I'm assuming it was something to do, yeah, some kind of Jewish studies class, or it could just been an economics class. I just find it interesting that there is this there's this kind of like almost intersection now because some of our other research focuses on immigration and the economics of it and econometric analysis of outcomes and impacts of immigrants in the United States and Israel.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this creates any kind of connections. But this wasn't on any of the legacy news, articles that we were reading about on the shooting.
Yeah, it does. So it does seem like similar to the situation in Australia. It does seem like this was most likely a target attack on.
It could possibly, we'll have to see later on, but it could
Yeah,
possibly
plus, I mean,
be spun as like a
yeah,
terrorist
yeah.
attack on
I mean, I think that's very
news.
likely what it's going to be seen as. I think that's very likely is in some ways what it is. But the real question is, I don't think that these are lone wolf attacks. I think that's the big
Yeah.
thing here. Is I don't think that these are lone wolf attacks. So even though it does seem like something that here we are standing afterwards with confirmation that this was likely done out of hatred for anti-Semitism. I mean, it does. I mean, I think that there is a level where, like, yeah, I mean, it does seem like this was an anti-Semitic attack, but why do these continue to keep increasing, and why does it seem like they get utilized for political opportunity? Um, and this continues to happen, and I think that in part, uh, again, and you always talked about this in the past, the idea that um, tensions in the external Jewish world could very well lead to the ability for people to move to Israel, but so it's kind of seen as a positive thing for the Israeli state. Period. So there's been connections to that kind of thing in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It
the same
it
reason
also
like
seems,
Israel supports Hamas. They've done a lot of stuff like this in the past.
yeah.
But this is also something that it kind of feeds into the story about the this pipe bomber, the January 6th pipe bomber, where we really don't know anything about this kid. He was supposed to be like, obviously like one of the MAGA people, and then it doesn't seem like he was really there, but they're presenting him as this like lone guy, and the same with the Charlie Kirk assassin, and the same with the guy that tried to kill Trump. That wasn't in like Matthew Higgs or whatever. I can't remember anymore. But either way, it does seem like
Yeah.
there's
It might have
so
been
many weird situations like this too.
Yeah.
And then just the timing of it, and the fact there's two of them, and again, the fact that this kind of thing happened, and the response has not very much been talking about the guns at all. I mean, I think part of that is the fact that Australia has very strict gun laws, and this happened there. So clearly, the gun laws don't work. Who would have ever guessed? Who would have ever guessed? The criminals who are going to kill a group of like 15 people are going to find a way to break the gun law. Like, what?
Exactly.
They're like, yeah, they're already breaking the law by killing the 15 people. I don't think the little firearm regulation is gonna be the thing that stops them. Wow, shucks. I was gonna kill 15 people, but this arms regulation really busted my balls here. So I don't think it really changes much analytically on what we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
But I
It
think
also
it's interesting.
seems like she teaches the principles of economics course, which is apparently the most popular class at Brown. So it most likely was just an economics class that she was teaching at the time.
Mm.
I
So maybe that's interesting. It just seems interesting too. Cause Visegrad also kind of a word source. I know that
Yeah.
so who knows? Um,
It feels like it's targeted just
does feel
because
like it's targeted.
I'm sure there's other Jewish professors that he could have also targeted.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine
If
it's
one that
targeted.
also teaches economics, especially with her research focusing on immigration,
Yeah,
and the impact of it within between the United States and Israel.
this is the thing. I imagine that again, the intentions of the attack likely are what they're presented to be for the one individual who's being used to carry out the attack. But again, it's more the fact that there's probably a network that basically coerces the person into doing this.
Yeah, we're gonna find out later that the FBI has had the info on her, has been in contact.
And been in contact with them exactly. This is
They've been watching him. He's been on a watch list.
yes. This is always what happens.
That's my next prophecy. That's my next prophecy.
As well. This is my prophecy as well. Is that there's going to be a lot of connections. Same thing with the Australian guy, and the fact that they did it around the same time. Again, it's very very interesting to say the very least. And again, the fact that they're utilizing it almost like clockwork for this political goal as well is quite interesting.
Yeah.
But either way, we wanted to give you that little snippet. Do you have anything else you want to add before we return back to the show?
Well, let's just start doom scrolling again and find more info. I think that's it.
All right. Let's get back to the episode. All right, so because we found another update. Again, within like seconds of the previous update, we probably should have just recorded this as one, but it's already been done. So the viewer is having to be put up through this whole copy editing nightmare. But who really cares? I don't really care. It's funny. It's what happens. We love you all anyways. Bullying via Voss. Um, Either way, Keller, would you like to inform the audience about what we know about the shooter now?
So like an hour ago on AF Post, it looks like it came from ABC. I've yet to find the exact article. Um, but apparently the Bondi Beach attackers have been identified because we talked about how they were father and son, but the investigators of the attack have said that they pledged allegiance to the Islamic State, which I guess to some that could be ISIS. And they were also known to counterterrorism authorities. So all the big players, CIA, I would assume Mossad and what I guess the KGB, all the counterterrorism authorities
Which is
have
so which is so
identified.
which is so perfect because we just left off
Just
talking
left
about
another postscript.
yeah, the last postscript that you just listened to. We just left off talking about the fact that it is very, very likely that these people would have been known by the feds. In Australia, we've already confirmed this to be the case. I imagine it's going to be very similar to Brown. And the question is, why there's nothing done to stop these people? How does this happen? Because they wanted it to happen. Like, what? Are you stupid? Like, ISIS, we put the like former member of ISIS into like the presidency in Syria. Like, ISIS, like, oftentimes works for us. That's why, like, the Taliban hates them so damn much. So, it is just very interesting. Amazing that within like 10 seconds we get proven I told you so. But it is very fascinating how this whole affair continues to proceed. And that this is just more and more evidence towards the fact these are not likely lone gunmen. All right.
This is true.
What do you think? Is there any takeaways you have for that?
It just goes back to what we were talking about in the main segments. Um, we're gonna see again another rampant attacks on from ISIS, people pledging themselves to Islamic State or whatever, you know, big bad, Islamicists are that they groups that exist. You're gonna see a surge of that, and it's gonna be all done. You're hearing it from here first.
Well, in the
It's gonna be all done to spin the narrative that anti-Semitism is on the rise.
yeah.
Islam is bad, and it's bad on other grounds, but it's bad in this particular case because of anti-Semitism,
people are supporting a Palestinian
and we're
state.
gonna you have to shut down your freedoms. You gotta shut down. You can't talk about it. You can't be quote unquote anti-Semitic. How they're gonna define that? It's just another power grab, and it's all to also embolden the state of Israel.
Yep, and Australia is already saying that they're going to expand their powers and everything, so it's already come to the
Exactly.
top that this is going to be done. So
You're hearing it from here first.
yeah, it's just so predictable. But anyways, we're going to actually get back to the episode this time.
Unless I find something else, you might see it back in 10
Yeah,
seconds.
we'll figure it out. Hopefully, though, that this is the last one. But I try to keep it from getting too far. Hopefully, not anything like freaky. But either way, let's get back to the episode. All right. So, moving on from that, I mean, we could go on with that for a while. And we kind of talked about this. I guess this is kind of in the same vein. So much news from the Middle East right now. I mean, there really is so much news from the Middle East right now. There's this story about Hamas says that Israel killed one of its senior commanders, and that this threatens the ceasefire once again. The fact remains that the ceasefire has really not ceased anything. Hundreds of Palestinians have continued to be killed. And with all this building tension in Syria, all this building tension in America and across, it seems like the ceasefire is probably going to fall apart. What do you think that's going to do for Trump's legacy as the supposed peacemaker if the ceasefire falls apart?
I don't think he'll be holding that title for long.
I think it's kind of funny that he even tries to claim it to begin with, but yes, I would agree. Um, just I just don't even know what to think about this whole situation. Yeah, it just does seem like it's eventually going to all just fall apart. Um, Here's this other story I saw, and I thought this was interesting. Basically talking about Ukraine, right? And how Zelensky is saying that he thinks that they're going to finally hold elections. This is largely a stipulation from Russia, as the Russians have been accusing Zelensky as of delaying elections and like making that one of their claims to him being authoritarian and saying that they're not going to make a peace deal with him or whatever. As part of the denazification of Ukraine and everything. So it seems like rumor has it that Trump is willing to give in to the Russian negotiation on this, and Zelensky finally, because of this big corruption scandal, is going to have to oblige. Um, so this might actually be the beginning of the end for Volodymyr Zelensky. What do you think about that, Keller?
Yeah, so his presidency was technically supposed to end in
Yep.
2024, but Ukraine doesn't have, well, not doesn't have, but bans wartime elections, which is
He
interesting.
suspended it. Yeah, he suspended it.
Yeah, I don't see why he's asking Trump and Europe to make sure that the election is secure. Is he worried that Russian voters will like rush to the polls and
Which doesn't even
print,
make any. I mean,
ballots?
I don't
Or
think that's possible because Russia is
I really
largely,
don't.
yeah, largely the Russians are on the Russian side of the border, so they're not going to be voting in Ukrainian elections.
Yes, I just don't see why the U.S. has to get involved with a foreign election.
The way you know what it is. The reason that he wants it is it's probably a way of like trying to rig the outcome in his favor. But the real, I mean, he's been doing that with everything. He wants U.S. protections, and he thinks that maybe if he can get the election to be a way of justifying U.S. protections, um, he can get it. But what he forgets is that like the Russian problem with Ukraine isn't like that Ukraine like has some land of Russians in it or something like that. It's that they want Ukraine to not join NATO or essentially join NATO. And the worry about like these quote unquote protections is that they basically amount to Ukraine essentially joining NATO. And you know what happens if that's the case? Russia can't control its next door neighbor, which is like what they want to do. And it's not even like they like want to like completely domineer them, but and they would have been happy in the past if Ukraine could have remained neutral, semi positive towards them, but largely neutral. But this is no longer the reality, and Ukraine's pushing towards NATO, so they're going to essentially enforce their will on Ukraine. So it seems like the elections are coming. The interesting thing too about these elections is I wonder what will actually happen with the candidates. I don't know if you know this, but one of the top candidates for the Ukrainian presidency, this Andriy Beletsky guy, is like a literal Nazi. So, um, and he's like very involved with the Azov Battalion, a big leader on the front line of the war. Rumor has it that like
I
he's
thought that was all Russian propaganda, though.
no, it's not. It's not at all.
Uh,
You think no, that's not Russian propaganda. No. Um no. Scott Horton writes about this, but also like the Azov battalion was most certainly not propaganda. There was literally Nazis in Ukraine, and because they were so aggressive, the Ukrainian military eventually succumbed to them and gave them their own military unit within the Ukrainian army. And that's the Azov Battalion. And they try to act like, well, it's not Nazi anymore, but what happened was that the leaders of it, like Valetsky, are now in high command, and they're the generals that have been in the front line in Ukraine for the longest time now. So like the military vanguard of the Ukrainian military is like largely like fascist nationalist. And the further west the Russians push the border, the more so they're going to swing that way. Now, they might not be strictly um, Western. I mean, that's probably the likelihood is that well, this is the thing that people have been talking about is that the Ukrainians, the further west they get pushed, it's likely that they're going to have like some kind of like stab in the back narrative where like they're going to end up being anti-Western and anti-Russian because of the fact that I mean, like the West betrayed them and left them out to dry, and the Russians took their land. So, but that's real. I mean, like it's not just Russian propaganda. I mean, I think the Russians somewhat exaggerate it, but like if he ends up winning the next election, which is not even impossible, I mean, how much are we really talking about it being exaggerated?
Yeah. I was just joking, but you're absolutely right. I'm very well aware it's not completely propaganda.
Okay.
Uh,
I was gonna say,
before our viewers, just to clarify.
this is one of those moments where where A, we don't have a face cam on, but B, I think a little
Yeah.
bit we both have a little bit of tism. I don't think either of us are autistic, but there's probably a little bit of tism there. So
Perfectly cool. I'm also reading though that a lot of other countries have done elections during
yeah,
conflict.
it's not a rare thing. It's really not a rare thing. They are very, very, very much exaggerating how much they think that this is gonna like essentially my thought is that the reason he wants to suspend elections is he wants to stay in power and he knows he's gonna lose. Because the Ukrainian
Oh,
people
for
are
sure.
pretty much done with the war. I mean, that's the real thing. Is that I think it's understated how fed up the Ukrainian people are with the war, and the reality is that it does seem like the Russians have already won. And basically, the longer they prolong the war, the question just becomes more and more so how much are the Russians going to win by, as opposed to whether or not they're going to win. So yeah, they just need to make a deal, and the only way Trump's going to make a deal is if he just withdraws from Ukraine. Like he needs to do a Pontius Pilate and just wash his hands of it. But who knows how that's going to ever happen.
Very true.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I mean, every single part of all these situations are such nightmares, and the thing about it is that like so much of this is obviously the result of state meddling in all these affairs, where we have overextended our empire, caused all these unintended consequences, and we have no way of actually solving the problems because the reality is America's getting weaker. And this kind of goes into the next story I have here. I wanted to talk about the Federal Reserve. I know that this is I don't think nearly as sexy to a lot of people as the Israel story or the Ukraine war or Brown or whatever. But honestly, it's just as, if not more, important. Um, I don't know if you were looking at this or saw anything about this, but
I did recently read something about Trump trying to get the rates down to like 1%.
yeah, he got the rates cut again. And this is in absence and of Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, who Trump's trying to push out, and it seems like he's going to be able to push out. Um, the this is in light of Powell basically being like, we're going to lower the rates because they're telling us to do it, but we don't really have a good economic framework to lower the rates, and they're already warning of like essentially stagflation. And it seems pretty likely that that's going to end up being what happens. Is that we're going to end up entering kind of a stagflation cycle where the inflation rates are going to keep going up, but the growth is not going to keep up with the inflation rates. And again, the reality is that, contrary to popular belief, this economic period we're going through, no matter how bad it is, this is actually the boom cycle of this economic cycle. All that money during COVID that was printed out of thin air has trickled through the economy, and we're living through the reality of that. But that small boom at the beginning, and the fact that we haven't hit a crash yet, is essentially the boom cycle. So the fact that the Fed is also basically, my understanding of it is that um, my understanding of it is that basically they are not really going off of data. They try to say that like Federal Reserve decisions are based off of data. Of course, we know all the numbers tend to be fixed, so what data they're going off of is largely numerology. But they're no longer saying that anymore, and it's just interesting to see how that now that they're able to kind of lean more into the fact that admitting that this is just a political action and there's no real scientific level here, which was always the case, but is just more obvious now. Um, it, it just seems to me like it just means that everything is going to become more exaggerated, and the government's going to play more of a role in the economy, and in doing so, it's just going to cause more economic problems. But, in some ways, it will continue to mess up the boom bust cycle, and hopefully eventually leads to people finally realizing how terrible of a system the Federal Reserve is, and how political and not scientific it actually is as well. So, do you have any comments about the Fed?
So what I'm understanding, if I remember anything from my money and banking class,
Yeah.
uh, it's cutting interest rates because essentially we're in that trough cycle, right? Or we're trying to get out of the trough. Like we've been in like a recession for a while, right?
No, no,
And
that's a
we haven't.
misunderstanding. That's a misunderstanding. No, so we've not been in a recession for a while. COVID was a bust in a sense, but largely
Okay.
COVID, what we've been
Was an
experiencing,
expansion of the money supply,
yes,
basically.
it's a very large expansion of the money supply as a way to try to combat state imposed depression. But what
Yeah,
in
and
doing
COVID it
so,
did.
in doing so, the expansion of the
Yeah.
money supply and the lowering of the interest rates causes an artificial boom.
Yeah,
And
the drugs. Yeah.
The COVID should have caused a much bigger bust, I think, in reality than it did. So we're living through the artificial boom, which is why the economy is so rickety and terrible right now.
Okay.
But this is the boom period. This is what I've talked to with Dr. Mark Thornton before, and he's the author of the Skyscraper Curse, and my former mentor at the Mises Institute. We really need to get Dr. Mark on this show at some point. But what he goes through is, he kind of elaborates on, is that um, essentially through this cycle of boom and bust, you're manipulating the interest rate, and the interest rate growth causes all these artificial projects to be invested in, like skyscrapers.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really interesting that I saw recently is that they've They're plotting to build all these tallest skyscraper in the world buildings. Yet, even though they're coming to the end of some of these really tall skyscraper projects, they're already worried about whether or not these projects are going to be viable, which is always a big indicator of the fact there is likely going to be a bust coming sooner than later. Um, I've been warning about this for a while. I really do think that by 2008, or not 2008, 2028, there probably will be a bust in the business cycle. The Fed is basically trying to claim things are so great because we're having all this growth from artificial intelligence. The reality is that from what I have seen, if you subtract the growth from artificial intelligence, the U.S. economy has basically not grown at all in the last year. And one of the things the Fed was saying is that when they give out a jobs report, there could be a difference in 600,000 or 60,000, I believe, is what the number. So they could say that there's 40,000 jobs, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in reality, what that could mean is it's actually negative 20,000 jobs. like, like they're giving them this that much of a window in how many jobs are created and being very loose with the numbers. Trump's trying to create this new sense of growth minus tariffs. So not the growth that actually happened, but because the tariffs sucked away the growth, but growth without the tariffs. Uh, it's just so asinine. It really is. Like it it's like watching a monkey go at the economy with a wrench and just trying to rearrange things and hoping that it's going to find a solution. I mean, here's the reality for anybody who thinks that there's like some kind of magical plan behind Trump's actions or that he knows what he's doing because he's a businessman. Running a business, being an entrepreneur, and building buildings is not the same as running an economy. Because fundamentally, what Trump doesn't understand is that him, as the head of the economy in the U.S., quote unquote, is not actually the head of the economy. He doesn't just pull a lever and make something happen. In reality, like, he is the inhibitor to growth, and how much power he exerts basically is contrary to how much growth will happen. So the only way he's going to actually fix the economy is by, as we keep saying, cutting the spending, cutting the inflation, and cutting the wars. But instead, he's going to manipulate the interest rate and probably cause one of the worst economic recessions in American history. And I think we're due for that. I mean, the fact the houses are so goddamn expensive is a good sign that that's probably the case because real estate tends to be one of, and this is why Dr. Mark talks about skyscrapers as a signal because it's such an expensive, high capital real estate investment that you make under very certain conditions that are only sustainable during the boom. But because of how much time it takes to construct it, they usually have to go under during the bust and then they get sold for liquidity and so on and so forth. Like the fact like the Burj Khalifa aligned closely with like 2008 and so on and so forth. But it this is one of those things where this really is going to be the nail in the coffin of the Trump administration. And they're going to lower these rates, try to boost this artificial growth. Houses are going to get more expensive for people our age for the next few years, but then it's going to finally crash. I really think it's going to be like a house of cards. And housing rates will go down, so that'll be at least good for people like us. I mean, I really do think that this has the possibility to be one of the worst economic crises uh, of the last 100 years. So we'll see what happens with it. But this seems to be more evidence in the contrary of Trump being able to fix the economy. He's going to lower the interest rates, create a little bit of artificial boom, and but I guess can he become even more obvious in the next cycle that that's not going to be manageable. And I think this stagflation is the beginning of that. It's them trying to essentially uh, it expand a boom, but there's not enough. Like we've reached the point where the investment is just not enough to match what is needed to artificially grow the economy. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So
Fun times. Fun times.
it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare scenario. It really is a nightmare scenario. I think that the fact that most people aren't talking about this at all is one of those things where it shows how little the American people know about this issue.
This is true. I mean, I didn't
Like,
even, other than like the tweet that I saw
yeah.
with Donald Trump, I had not really heard anything about
But this is such a big and
just the big
I'm very
contest.
thankful to Mises for keeping this up to date. But this is like it is a big issue because I mean the thing is that like this war that Trump's been waging against the Federal Reserve in some ways has been beneficial. I think that what it has done is it has removed a lot of the scientific illusion that the Fed shrouded itself in and has exposed that the Fed is a political machine, which is good. But I don't know if I think that giving more executive control to the president over the Federal Reserve is going to end up being a good idea. Um, and that seems to be the way we're leaning. And the next guy that Trump puts in there, let me see what his name is again. There's been like two candidates that they've been going through. Um, I think it's Kevin Hassett is one of them, and I think he's the leading one. Um, and then there's one other one. I can't remember what the other guy's name is. It's likely going to be Hassett though. And what I've heard about Hassett and the other guy is that they're basically both just sycophants. I mean, they're both going to just kind of rubber stamp whatever Trump has to say. So, um, in terms of economic sanity, it seems like that's pretty unlikely to be something that gets taken into effect. So, there's always that. Um, it's just so crazy that they think that they can just Herculean save the economy. And it's going to be more evidence that these people are just a bunch of idiots, especially these like progressive Republicans, like these Orange Cass types that basically believe that if we implement progressive economics, it's the libertarians that have been the problem. We've listened to the libertarians too much, uh, which I don't even know how you could be born in a world where you have that idea, but that is what some of these people are saying. So, um, I I can't. I mean, we're going to see what happens with the Federal Reserve, but we're going to see like if we just allow for Trump to make his own form of socialism, um, it's not going to have the effects that these people think they're going to have, and they're going to really regret giving all this power to the opposition. Uh, on spending, one other story, kind of on the same idea. Did you see this story about the Obamacare extensions?
Yeah, a little bit. Man, I didn't even know this was even like still a thing.
Yeah. Well, it
Uh,
is, but it might not be much longer. Um, so the they essentially it seems like Obamacare, a lot of the aspects of it are are planned to expire, But the Republicans are trying to revise some certain admissions, but there's a very good chance that it could just fall through. Um,
Mhm.
so, and of course, the way they're arguing for it is that, like, well, if they fall through, it's going to make like premiums skyrocket. And this is true in the short term, but as it always ends up being the case, like we're talking about the fact that Obamacare, right, was called the Affordable Care Act, and it was implemented. And since it's been implemented, healthcare is more expensive than ever as a percentage, not just as a pure raw number, not like it tracks, for instance, the percentage of inflation. As like an actual percentage of how much people are paying for it, is more expensive than it's ever been since Obamacare was implemented. And the solution is to a extend Obamacare, but also on top of extending Obamacare, people are now advocating, of course, as they've been advocating for a while, is for this single payer insurance policy run by the state government, which would end up being a disaster. And I just can't believe that we keep going through this cycle over and over again. I can't believe that the American people are really dumb enough to believe that that extending Obamacare is really going to help them with their health insurance payments. Again, it's become more expensive since Obamacare is implemented, and Obamacare is largely to blame because of the increase of price of health care. And so, uh, and there's been good research on this because they essentially the market mechanisms were largely determined by the big corporations. Unsurprisingly, the people who helped to lobby for their special interest in the bill made a lot of profit, while the American people once again have to foot the bill for the government and its cronies. And instead of the American people realizing that they just need to cut their losses with this terrible system, the answer is once again to double down, which will give these people more money. So it's just so exhausting, and it's hard to even go through all these different stories and see how um, almost every single week the politicians find new ways of trying to just 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 try to guide this failing ship forward and have no solutions. They just don't know what to do at all. And the Republicans in particular, it's just amazing how they can serve nothing. Um and they, because of their concessions and everything and how worried they are about the midterms, like it's amazing. And plus I think that this is going to win them the midterms. It's not. They're not gonna like have their little concession on Obamacare be the thing that saves them. People already think that they're gonna cut it, and they're probably gonna cut it somewhat anyways. So you might as well just cut it. Like, why would you not just cut it? But they will not concede that the reason they're actually unpopular is because of all this military stuff they're doing and the Epstein stuff that they tried to cover up. And a bajillion other reasons, but this is not going to solve the problem. So
It,
it's just the
yeah.
same story over again, Keller. I mean, that's what it really feels like. Is it's just the same story over again.
But what if we just gave the government a little bit more control?
Yeah,
Maybe then they could fix it. I think that could work,
I
right?
think that could work. I think that would be the. I think what we've come to realize after all these times, where for the last 100 years, all we do is expand government power,
That's the
is
solution.
is that we
Yeah.
need to expand it more.
Exactly. So
Speaking
true.
of expanding government power, this last story, and this is kind of a pet story of mine. Um,
Naturally.
China,
If it's about China.
yeah, China looks
Yeah.
to bring Okinawa into play as a feud with Japan escalates. So there was this a very interesting story about how China had a number of its like fighter jets operating around American bases near Japan and trying to intervene or Japanese pilots and very very odd story about multiple different levels of Japan seeming to basically be more in contention with China than it's been in a long time. And this is largely because of this new prime minister that they have in power in Japan, the lady Sanae Takachi. Uh, Basically, she's pretty hardline against China, wants to increase their military in Japan, and really posture against China in support of Taiwan, which is part of the U.S. plan to try to somehow keep Taiwan out of Chinese control, which all that this seems to be doing is provoking China even further, especially now that we keep getting reports about um all these sort of weird stories about how the US government doesn't believe they can beat the Chinese anymore and it's more of a containment policy and they calling them an equal competitor. I think it is very likely that the Chinese military is on par at this point with the American military, at least in the Pacific. And I mean, they've been on par with them in the Pacific for a while. The Americans are so overextended that, of course, they could never wage a war just in the Pacific. So if the Chinese are more powerful than them in the Pacific, China is the main power in that area, not the United States with its alliance in South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. By essentially supporting Japan and having them militarize further, especially since they're not going to militarize enough to beat China. And Japan has so many issues. The Japanese economy, our debt to GDP problem is a big issue, right? We have $39 trillion now worth of debt, right? And that's about, I think, equivalent to about 130, 140% of US GDP to debt ratio. Japan has a debt ratio of 200%. Like they have double the debt of their entire economy. So the idea that Japan is going to become a military power that can actually fight the Chinese is probably one of the most ridiculous ideas I've ever heard. What this instead does is it provokes the Chinese and continues to make them feel pressured to basically posture militarily towards Taiwan and creates this whole feedback loop. The only way we're going to prevent a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is by de-escalating Taiwan and removing the incentive for them to invade. And this lady in Japan, I think, is doing the exact opposite of that. And it's not the Chinese are also, responsible for this too. But China's the main player, and they view Taiwan obviously as part of their territory. But historically, in the early 2000s, there was a lot of cooperation between the Chinese and the Taiwanese, largely because America was not intervening in the region. We really do not have an incentive here. We really don't. I don't understand why we believe that we have to defend Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan when those three countries are really not economically beneficial to us, nor are they actually military powers. The main things we maintain there are military bases against China. But China has been postured since Nixon as an ally until Trump won, where we really strong arm China again. So if China in theory should be an ally, uh, which I believe is true, because really we don't have many political like politically on like a global stage, there's not actually many conflicts between the US and China. I mean, it's actually kind of interesting how the Republicans want to make Russia more of an ally, but we have more obvious political conflicts with the Russians. Um, with China, I mean, basically all you have to do is make Japan and China get along, and Taiwan and China get along, and there would literally be no problems over there with like the Chinese. But we continue to have this weird posturing towards them, and this support of Japan seems to be the next level of this tension that continues to build. And I think also it is showing that China is willing to threaten the Japanese for their posturing, and probably is going to, in some ways, make the current prime minister think a little bit harder about what she's going to be saying and moving forward in her posturing towards China. Plus, what you have to understand is anything about Japanese militarization, which this new Japanese prime minister wants to do, right, immediately elicits memories in the Japanese mind, in the Chinese mind, to World War II, where like the idea of Japan having like this massive military is just like it revokes blood memories in the Chinese mind largely, where
Mm-hmm.
they remember what happened during World War II and how terrible the Japanese were, and the idea of Japan being a military power has long been something that China does not want to see. So the fact that she's threatening it, I think it is one of those things where China is willing to really be aggressive to posture themselves against that. So I think it's a much more interesting story than it's getting any kind of press for. I feel like it's so interesting because we always like these Republicans will always like try to say like, oh, we need to put more focus on China. We need to put more focus on China, and then like the next thing they do is give more money to Israel, and they never talk about China. Of course, they want to put more money towards China, often in the wrong direction. I think that really the the only option we have and that we're left with, and this is even assuming that the Chinese numbers is exaggerated, is for us to make a peace with them and to basically get Taiwan and China to kind of return back to the one China policy that they were going through in the early 2000s. Anything else seems to have been a failure, and it it doesn't seem like it makes any sense for us to risk our relationship with our largest trading partner over countries that, sure, they're ideologically and militarily connected to us, but they really actually aren't as important to us as China is. China is our biggest partner in terms of the American people, not in terms of the American government. Of course, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan are all more important to the American government. But for the American people, China is more of an ally than any of these countries. So it's really quite shocking, especially since Trump and Xi had seemed to be getting along better, to see this kind of expansion in China and this kind of escalation in the Japanese Chinese relationship. They're talking about like questions of whether uh like Japan really owns Okinawa, but I mean that's basically irrelevant. I don't think China's going to take Okinawa, or I mean also there's like probably a likelihood that they're trying to be like alluding to the fact that it's not actually owned by the Japanese, but like it's has all these American bases there. So like who really occupies those islands? But either way, I just thought that was a really interesting story. Do you have anything to say about that, Keller? I know it's not really your area of expertise.
It's not my forte, but it's very interesting nonetheless
Yeah.
to be a little bit educated on it.
Yeah, well, and it's again, it's a theater that doesn't often get covered, even though because again, it's not as sexy as Russia or the Middle East, but in reality, a lot more money flows through the Pacific than either of those two areas.
Yeah.
So in terms of what's actually more important, this is a really interesting development. Um, but other than that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we should cover. I know there was some kind of thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene made a statement after she went on this like interview show, and she basically was like, "Oh, he didn't bully me out, but she's still out of office or whatever," and people are wondering why she's out of the office. I think that's just all speculation, and more and more of that's just like, oh, how can you even get more into that? I never thought she was that impressive to begin with, and it goes back to the fact that I think that the real America First candidate's Thomas Massey. But I don't know if you saw that at all, or if you had anything else you wanted to give any final comments on.
No, I didn't see this about MTG.
Yeah, I don't think it was too big of a story. I mean, it was basically just some of the stuff she was talking about. She made a good statement. I think the one point she made was the fact that Trump called her a traitor. And like the way she said it was like at the same time Trump met with the current president of Syria, who was a member of Al Qaeda, and then he met with Mohammed bin Salman, who murdered an American journalist. And then he met with Zoran Mamdani, who's a proclaimed socialist. At that same time, he said that Marjorie Taylor Greene was the traitor. Um,
Hmm.
I think that shows a lot about who's the real traitor to the America First movement. I do think that this goes back to the fact that I think that Trump has basically betrayed every single promise he made. So I thought that was interesting. Other than that, I didn't see much that was interesting. It's just that one line kind of stuck with me, and I do think she's right. I think that's one of the things that made her popular is that despite not being, I mean, she was a crazy bitch. I mean, that was like her entire character. But she sometimes said things that were pretty profound, and I don't even know if she thought they were as profound when she said them as they were. But I guess it's just the honesty of it. But um, other than that, I don't know. Do you have any other stories or anything that you thought would be relevant?
Nothing that I saw at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it was a busier news week than I really thought it was going to be coming in. But I mean, now that we're starting to get to the holidays, things are starting to get to a lull. Oh, one thing that was interesting, and this is in relation to some of the work I'm doing with like Loper Bright, which is the Supreme Court case that overturned Chevron deference. Is
Hmm.
that there was this they overturned disparate impact liability at the Department of Justice recently. And disparate impact liability, right, was essentially part of the Civil Rights Act, where even though you couldn't do this as a private company or a private individual, if outcomes from a policy were different, uh, even if intention was not provable, you could hold the individual liable for discrimination in relation to like race, sex, gender, etc. Again, even if you couldn't prove there was any intent of racism, in you could say that because there was a different outcome, you that they owed you liability for that. So that got finally removed because of the Supreme Court case that ended last year. Fortunately, I have an article about this, one of my AFP blog posts. But that's one little silver lining of this terrible news cycle is that at least the Supreme Court is doing some things that are better. And it is interesting because for a long time, the Supreme Court has been actually a tool largely used against the right. The fact that the Supreme Court is so dominated by Thomas and Alito has led to some actually really good outcomes. And it seems like the court probably is currently the best and most literalist form of government because Congress can't do anything, and the executive is so overinflated in power. I mean, we really do only have like the courts who give us anything good right now. So,
Yeah.
so that's a pretty interesting one, just because um, they overturned it, and it was like essentially the way it worked was that like before Chevron, right? They could basically the idea was that a entity of the U.S. government, if it was not clear what the statute meant, they could have multiple interpretations, and they get to choose what interpretation they chose to enforce as a form of quote unquote deference to the agency. So essentially, even though the wording of the Civil Rights Act pretty much made it explicit that this was based on intent, what the law was requiring, the agency under deference decided to add a new obligation. And what Loper Bright did was it overturned the legal precedent that deference existed and was allowable. Instead, the Supreme Court implemented that the statute has one intended meaning, and as it's interpreted, and the enforcement of the law has to match the intended meaning of the statute, which is crazy that you would have to specify that, right? Like the fact that you have to specify that laws mean what they say and the agency has to enforce the law as written. Like, isn't that crazy that that was even a question? And not even that it was even a question, but it was a question that was rose before the Supreme Court, and the old Supreme Court ruled in favor of saying, no, the agency can just decide what they want.
That is crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And so thank goodness for Thomas and Alito, because they largely have been overturning it. I have some hope that they'll probably do the same things about tariffs. I think that constitutionally, it's pretty clear that tariffs as a tax are to be created by the legislative branch. And since Trump made these tariffs through executive order, and he is not the legislative, taxes are an Article 1 thing. He is Article 2 of the Constitution. And again, tariffs are a tax. So because he's Article 2 and not Article 1, and he's raising a tax, which is only a provision in Article 1, then it's unconstitutional and they're going to get tossed out. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, I think, it's one of those things where, like, Thomas and Alito, I think, they're actual constitutionalists. I mean, like, they will go against Trump if they think it's for the betterment of the country. And they're not really afraid to do that. So, because they're not politicians. They don't lose their term. They die in office. So, there is a benefit to the court there. But, this court can be such a double-edged sword. I mean, all these branches can be. That's why I feel it's such a bad form of government. But it is what it is. But other than that, I think that pretty much covers everything. So make sure to follow me and Keller on Twitter. There'll be a little thing at the end with both of our accounts. And please make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. You can follow us on Spotify. I think I have it set up for Amazon and Apple Podcasts as well. Wherever you hear your podcast, you can find us. Unless, do you have anything you like to say to the viewers before we go, Keller?
None that I can think of. I'll see y'all next time. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do. If we're gonna record something this last week before Christmas. We might be able to get something recorded this coming Friday, or uh, if not, it'll just be Christmas break. So you know how that goes. Either way, though, we're gonna try to see what we can do. We didn't record over Thanksgiving, so the Monday after Christmas, I would not expect a video. So, but next week I think we'll try to get one out. So we'll see you guys then. Thank you guys all for watching again, and we'll see you soon. Bye.